Hey guys, welcome back to another video where we are going to look at AgilePoint NX connector for Abbyy Vantage, which is an intelligent document processing platform for digital workforce. Intelligent document processing, also known as IDP, solutions transform unstructured and semi-structured information into usable data. It is the next generation of automation able to capture, extract, and process data from a variety of document formats. It uses AI technologies such as natural language processing, computer vision, deep learning, and machine learning to classify, categorize, and extract relevant information and validate the extracted data. AgilePoint now integrates with Abbyy's IDP platform called Abbyy Vantage to make the unstructured data actionable. What is significant about this partnership is that there is a two-way communication between the two platforms. A document which is first made available to AgilePoint can be sent for processing to Abbyy Vantage to extract data from it in electronic format using pre-trained skills, and at the same time, it also covers scenarios where document is first sent to Abbyy Vantage to extract data, which acts as a business event trigger and kicks off a process on AgilePoint side and passes the extracted data to AgilePoint for processing. Let's look at this connector in action. I'm in my AgilePoint portal right now. Now, before we look at how it interacts with Abbyy, let's look at my Abbyy portal over here. So I'm logged into Abbyy Vantage and I've created a bunch of document skills and process skills. I'm going to use a couple of process skills for today's demo. The first one I'm going to use is invoice processing of bound OCR. In order to interact with this, if I drill down into the process skill over here, what this process skill is doing is it gets a document as part of a REST API input. So the trigger type for this particular process skill is REST API. It does an OCR, classifies the document. We have various kind of invoices available. So as you can see, for the various countries, I have different invoice types available. So it classifies it, extracts the data based on the classification. If there is any issue which is found in the document during extraction, it creates a manual review link for somebody to look at it manually and fix the results, and finally sends it to the output source. In my case, for the first demo, I have set the output source as a RESTful API. Now, before we start interacting with Abbyy, we need to create access token for Abbyy within AgilePoint. So I'm in the Manage Center module now. I can create an access token at a global level and share it across applications, or I can create it at an app level and restrict it to be used within a single app. I'm going to create a global level access token in this case. So I'm going to expand App Builder, Global Access Token, Add Token. You'll see a new token type called Abbyy. Select that, click Next, give it a nice looking name. Provide the URL of your Abbyy subscription. In my case, I'm connecting to Abbyy's US server. Now, Abbyy supports OAuth2 authentication scheme. So I'm going to go back to Abbyy Vantage portal, click on Configuration, Public API Client. From the drop-down, select Add Client. It gives me a client ID and client secret. I can copy it, go to a notepad, paste it, copy the secret, paste it as well. Now I could have saved it as a file, which is highly recommended. I'm going to go ahead and click Close. Give it a name. Next, it is going to ask me to add a redirect URI. So click on this. Go back to Manage Center. Copy the redirect URI. Paste it. Click Apply. Uncheck the required PKCE checkbox and check the Allow Issuing Refresh Token to refresh access tokens. So the configuration on the Abbyy side is done. We're going to go back to our Manage Center screen and enter our client ID and client secret. Scroll down and I can say get OAuth2 access token. So I get back the OAuth2 access token from Abbyy. I can also set up my renewal rate. So I can say auto renew my access token every 15 minutes or 30 minutes or every hour. I'm going to set it to every 15 minutes and click save. So if you can see, the new access token has been created. Now, once the access token has been created over here in AgilePoint, we're going to go to App Builder. It's an invoice processing scenario which I'm going to use. What you see is there is a new activity group called Abbyy Vantage over here, under which there are 4 activities. Get classification results. This is used if I wanted to just classify a document. I can pass in a document and get the result that which type of document it is. Get results, get transaction information, and start transaction. We are going to see some of them in action. Here is my high level process. Somebody fills up a form, attaches an invoice. We start a transaction within Abbyy. Once the transaction has been completed, we get transaction information. Check if the transaction was completed successfully or does it need a manual review. If it needs a manual review, we assign a task to somebody within AgilePoint to perform the manual review within Abbyy and indicate that the review has been done. Once the document issues have been fixed, we get the results from Abbyy and show those results in an electronic format on an approval screen where somebody goes in and reviews the application. If everything looks good, it goes through further straight through processing where I'm going to insert the record into a backend database. Now, as far as Abbyy's activities are concerned, the first one I used over here is start transaction. I give it a nice looking name. Connect to my document repository where the document is available. For my demo, I've uploaded the document to box.com. Connect to the document repository using the document repository access token. Provide the file path, which is dynamic file path in my case. Next, I'm going to connect to Abbyy using the access token I created earlier. I can specify what kind of skill I want to consume within Abbyy Vantage. It can be a document skill, it can be a process skill, it can be a classification skill. In my case, I'm going to consume a process skill. It shows me all the process skills available in a drop down. I selected one of them, and the return results, it returns me back a transaction ID, which I'm storing in a local variable called transaction ID. The next activity is get transaction information. So once the process has been executed on Abbyy's side, I'm going to try to get the transaction information. So I connect to Abbyy, provide the transaction ID of the transaction which I captured in the previous step. Now, when a document is processed, Abbyy has 2 settings. It can send you just the field JSON with the name value pair for those fields, or it can send you the entire metadata of the document, which provides the document definition as well as the values. I can also store the status of what has been written by Abbyy, and in case there has been a manual review triggered within Abbyy, it gives me back the manual review link. And the third activity I'm going to use is the get results. So again, connect back to Abbyy, choose the skill type. In my case, it's a process skill. I selected the process skill. Within the process skill, there are various invoice types which are available. I selected the one which I'm interested in. I'm processing a US invoice. Pass in the transaction ID. Now I know that I've set up my Abbyy process to return back the field JSON instead of the field metadata JSON, which you can see over here. If I click on output, under settings, I said return the values only instead of value and metadata. So what I did over here, I selected the radio button use field JSON and mapped it to the file ID, which has the field JSON file ID. And then I'm going to specify my mapping. So I've opened the mapping dialog. On the left hand side, what you see is the field JSON schema returned by Abbyy. And on the right hand side, what you see is the AgilePoint process and form schema. And I've done a mapping over here for the repeating rows of invoice. Now I could alternatively also store the OCR field JSON into a document repository as well. So if I select this checkbox, additional configuration windows open up where I can store the extracted field JSON as well. In my case, I don't need that. So once this process has been created, I've published it out. I'm going to go to my work center and initiate a new request. I'm going to enter some basic information about the submitter and upload the invoice. And go ahead and click submit. A new process has been initiated. So if I go to processes, go to invoice processing, I'm going to open the process viewer. I'm going to work off the process viewer so that you guys can follow the process along. As you can see, it has started the transaction. Now it went ahead and executed the get transaction information. And as you can see, it found some issue in the document. So it went through the manual review route. So Abby told us back that there is some manual review which is required. The reason for that is if you look at my invoice, instead of a decimal over here, there is a comma. So it is asking me to verify this as some of the validations failed. I'm going to drill down, open my form. A task has been assigned to me to fix it. I'm going to click a link which takes me to Abby's UI, the manual review screen. It shows me the document image as well as the extracted data side by side. I'm going to fix a couple of them. As you can see, there are some validation errors. I'm going to go ahead and say this should be decimal instead of comma. Once the errors have been fixed, I'm going to mark it as completed on the Abbyy side. Close the window, go back to AgilePoint UI and say I've fixed all the errors and click submit. Now this time, because there are no errors in the document, it went back, got the transaction info again. This time it didn't find any errors. It went ahead and got the results and assigned a task to the manager to review the invoice. In my case, I'm going to play the role of manager as well so that I don't have to log in and log out. So I'm going to just go ahead and drill down, open the form. You can see the basic information and it also shows me the extracted information. So if I open the invoice side by side over here, now my manager doesn't know anything about Abbyy at this point of time. He's looking at it within AgilePoint. And as you can see, he's looking at the invoice which was stored in box.com over here. And he can compare it with the line items which have been extracted. So you can see the invoice number got extracted, the invoice date, due date, and the line items got extracted as well along with the total. So once everything looks okay to me, I am going to go ahead and click approve and submit. And it goes out and sends out an email to me, inserts those records along with the line item within my database, and the process ends. Now that was scenario number one, where things started within AgilePoint and we reached out to Abbyy to do the document processing part. Now we are going to have a second scenario where we are now going to start within Abbyy first and then eventually send the data over to AgilePoint. I'm going to close this out. I'm going to open an email and I'm going to email an attachment to a mailbox. The mailbox I'm going to use over here is a Gmail box and I'm going to send an email over here. I've created a folder called processed where all the process invoices would be stored. Before we run this demo, let's look at this process skill in the Abbyy skill catalog. So I'm going to open this one. For the input activity, I have set it to be kicked off based on an email box. And if I go to settings, so if you remember, the previous one was kicked off using a RESTful API. This one is kicked off based on an incoming email. I've said monitor a folder called inbox within Gmail. And once it is processed, move it to the process folder. And once all the extraction is done and if there is any manual review required, manual review is done, finally make a call to AgilePoint to initiate the process and pass in the contextual information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my email. I'm going to send this document over to the Gmail ID. I'm going to switch to my Gmail box. So a new document has been received, and soon it is going to be moved to the process folder. So as you can see, now it has been processed and it has been moved to the process folder. So if we go back to our other browser window within Abbyy, if I go to skill monitor and see how this is progressing, the skill I'm using currently is the OCR trigger one. There's one skill which is instance which is in progress. Now it is sitting at the manual reviews tab because I again uploaded an invoice which had an error. If there was no error, it would have gone for straight through processing. So I'm going to do my manual review. I'm going to use Abby's UI this time to invoke manual review. Fix the error message. Replace the comma with a decimal. Click complete task. If I go back to Abby skill monitor, it tells me that that skill has completed successfully. That means a process should have been kicked off on the AgilePoint side. Now, if we switch back to Work Center over here, go to Processes, you can see that there has been a new process which has been kicked off. Now, in this case, the process was kicked off once the document was processed on Abby's side, and then eventually it made a API call into AgilePoint to kick off a process where we executed the get transaction info and get results, and straight away went for review invoice because all the manual review on the Abby side has already taken place. So the process is much more simpler. Now with this, you can see that a business process which has been designed within AgilePoint can now bring in OCR as well as intelligent document processing capabilities right within the business context of the business process. Thanks a lot for your time.